Wow, what a year and a half it's been. Let's face it. After coronavirus and wearing a mask and not wearing a mask and all that came with that, the world is finally reopening and many of us were left, well, let's say with a pain in our back. Well, we know someone who makes getting aligned a snap. Well, it's more like a snap and a crack. SnapCrack offers hassle-free chiropractic adjustments for just $29 a visit. No hidden fees and no appointment needed. Just walk in and reap the benefits of their 3-step process of the crack, the drop, and the click. Trust us, good things come in threes. Their clinics even offer monthly memberships for $49 that include adjustments and Snap Boost, which is a vitamin therapy injection. Vas a salir nuevo de paquete. So visit snapcrack.com today to find the location nearest you and just stop by. You'll be in and out before you know it. And after all, when you feel better, you do better. Hey people, this is DJ.
And this is Ish. And this is Season 4 of Pero Let Me Tell You. Rubio. It's like I'm talking to a bearded Paulina Rubio.
Oh my God, la chica dorada. I'm not that dorado.
Knowing you probably can get through TSA a lot quicker.
There was a time that I couldn't get through TSA, but that's another story for another day. How is everybody? What is it? Episode 166?
166. Happy Pero Friday.
166. Happy Better Friday, everybody. How's everybody doing?
I think everybody's doing great. But I think, the most important thing to say is, you and I are now speaking and recording this from 2 different states.
We are, and neither of us are in Florida.
No, and they could not be 2 more disparate places. You are in Manhattan at literally the New Yorker Hotel.
Yes, live from New York.
Yes, and I am in a cabin in the mountains.
I know, right? I mean, the only more like opposite like would have been if you would have been a cabin in like Alaska.
Yes, and then we would have had Sarah Palin as a special guest.
Oh my God! Well, at least you can see Russia from your house.
Exactly, but I don't want to see Russia right now.
But this is a commitment to our listeners that it doesn't matter where we are, we will bring you an episode.
Damn it, you get an episode a week until we go on hiatus. But until then, you get an episode a week.
Somehow we're getting an episode a week. So I hope everybody had a good week. This past week was a little exhausting, and we'll get to that in a minute. With everything of that happening in Cuba, obviously our last episode 165 was all Cuba related, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I kind of wanted to kind of touch base in terms of since I am live from New York.
How is it? How is it post-COVID?
So what I want to know is, and this is a legit question, who the hell said New York was dead?
Well, I mean, they've been open for a couple months now that you went, so maybe they meant March.
Okay, yes, we all know that New York got particularly hit hard by COVID. We all know that.
Yep.
But that was in March of last year, right? But the rhetoric has been, after that, maybe starting from the fall and on, that everybody left New York and nobody's in New York, and New York is closed, and everything in New York, New York is dying. I'm like, okay, if New York is dying, then
it has resurrected.
It has resurrected, or it looks damn good, because with a few minor exceptions, like I don't see any difference to. And I mean, I did not live in New York like you did, but I've always said this about New York. I haven't lived, like, obviously you lived in New York for 2.5 years, 3 years, whatever. But I've been visiting New York since I was a kid because I had a lot of family here. So I grew up coming to New York. I don't even know.
New York. Right?
It is incredible how I know addresses in New York better than I do in Miami.
Same.
Because
even before I moved there.
Okay, but let me tell you why. Because New York, you know what comes after 5?
6?
And you know what comes after 6?
7?
Not 7th Terrace, 7th Place, 7th Avenue,
7th Court, 7th
Court,
Lane.
7th Avenue. That is why. So
What a novel fucking concept.
that's why, like, when you tell me, like, an address in New York, I'm like, okay, in my mind, I see it. I'm like, oh, okay, this is more or less where it's at. And again, I've never actually lived here. I mean, I've come here a lot, but I feel comfortable enough with New York that, like, I kind of won't get lost, you know?
Right.
Maybe, like, very specific niche things, I don't know, but I kind of won't get lost, and I kind of know the MTA. Like, I know the red line goes all the way to downtown, and it could take you all the way to the Bronx. Like, I know, like, kind of the basics of it, but don't give me an address in Miami, because in Miami, when people tell me, no, yo estoy por la 142, la 155, and I'm like, that can be in, like, another country, and I would not know.
Especially if it's in Hialeah.
Hialeah, Coral Gables.
Well,
you know,
all the names,
yeah, and then, you know, if you live down south, it's like I live in 223rd Avenue, and I'm like, oh my God, is that in the Gulf of Mexico?
It's actually the city of Atlantis. It came back.
But you know where that used to happen to me a lot too? In Chicago. In Chicago, I remember, you know, when I lived in the Midwest, I used to go to Chicago, like, all the time.
Yeah,
so, like, downtown Chicago, like, I remember people used to ask me for, like, oh, how do I get here and how do I get there? Like, people would stop me and, like, you know, ask me for directions, and I would be able to give them. Don't ask me to give directions in Miami, because it's not like that. You know, it comes after 5, 6. You know, it comes after 6, 7.
Not where we live.
I love how in Miami, you know, again, Kendall Drive, 88th Avenue, right? Street. I love how it's 88th Street, right? Okay, Kendall Drive, La 88, ends at US 1.
Right.
But in South Miami, somewhere by, I don't know, Church of the Epiphany, 88 starts again. And I'm like, but why?
But wait a minute. Espérate. I have a better one for you. Coral Way. Coral Way, that in Coral Gables, it's like 18th and 21st and 24th, and by the time it gets to, like, past the youth fair, I think it becomes like 32nd.
Why? That's like in Hialeah. My office is on 16th Avenue, right? Mm-hmm. When 16th Avenue, the same street, you are on the same street, you cross Okeechobee, it turns into Milam Berry Boulevard, which is that 60-something. And I'm like, okay, so 16th Avenue turns into 60-something street, like, for no reason. Like, just
because.
That's why, like, here I am in a city I don't live in, and I know the address is better than the city that I do live in. Like, it's crazy. So, listeners, I'm sure I'm not the only person that believes this.
This is true. But speaking of addresses, you this week were actually at possibly one of the most famous addresses in the United States.
I was.
1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
I sure was.
You
I went to go visit Joe.
You went to go visit Joe? You didn't go see Kamala?
Well, no, because her house is next door. It's the Blair house.
I heard that. Yeah, you were up in D.C. and you were actually there with the protests. It's funny because I feel weird calling them on our end, calling them protests. I feel more comfortable calling it a demonstration because I feel like we're not we're not protesting, quote unquote, right?
Yes.
Like,
so, you know, I went back and forth on should I go, should I not go, should I go, should I not go. But, you know, as I think I posted on our Instagram, you know, if you talk the talk, you gotta walk the walk. And
you're already in the area.
Well, yes and no. It actually was a major deviation.
Well,
but whatever.
Listen, you're in New York right now, so you were definitely closer to DC than if you had been in Miami.
Yes, but when I went to DC, I was not in New York, and again, it was like a major. I was going to be in a completely different place if the protests would have happened. But yeah, I mean, if you talk the talk, you got to walk the walk, and I felt that, you know, this is something that I needed to do. I'm not new to protesting. I have a resume now of protesting at this point for demonstrations, But I mean, I think that it was something that was very, very personal to us, and we're constantly talking about it. So you have to show up and you have to do what you have to do.
What was it like there?
I'm,
What was the
I'm
vibe?
So here's the thing. So actually, funny thing. So when I was there, as many of our listeners probably saw on our Instagram live, I went live. I went live for about 15, 20
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah.
And when I went live, everybody was asking me on the live questions. Like, everybody was asking me, like, what are they saying? Who's screaming?
Oh, the guy
What's
screaming about
going
like
on?
child molestation.
Because what happened was, anytime you go to like a DC, there's always people protesting about something, right? At the National Mall, there's always people. Usually it's small, maybe a dozen people, but there's always somebody protesting about something. And there was this guy, you could tell that he had his issues. There's this guy with this like huge, one of those, what is it, gyrophones or whatever?
No, a megaphone.
A megaphone.
What's
What's a gyrophone?
What's a gyrophone?
A gyrophone?
I don't.
Gyrophone? Anyone?
I don't think that's a thing.
Did I just make that word up?
I think you just created a speaker with a Greek sandwich.
Okay. So, oh my gosh. So he had this megaphone that was like louder. I mean, he was louder than the Cubans. I mean, can you just imagine?
That is a goal.
So he completely just spoke over everybody there. So, and he was talking about, like, he was crazy. So he was talking about, like, Jesus is coming and your sins and wash away your sins. And he was talking about pedophilia. So the funny thing is that when you saw the Instagram live, the images were of the people protesting of Cuba, but the audio was of this man, because I wasn't taking video of him, but you could hear him.
Right.
So everybody was like, "Pero qué es eso? ¿Qué está pasando?" So look, as far as the mood goes, I have to be honest. How do I pose this? I was a little bit disappointed because I think I was there to bring awareness to what is going on in Cuba,
To amplify
and
the
for
voice of the Cuban people.
to amplify the voices of the Cuban people in Cuba. And I think that you can do that, and you can do that vigorously, all right, without being political in terms of your political affiliation to the U.S.
Mhm.
Because I've made on this show very clear my political affiliations, and
Libertarian. Yes, we've established that.
and this isn't about Joe Biden. This isn't about Donald Trump. This isn't about the Republicans or the Democrats, the liberals or conservatives. This is about Cuba and the Cuban people. And when I went, at least when I was there were a lot of people with like Trump signs and just talking smack about Joe Biden. And it wasn't the type. They were saying profanities about Joe Biden, and I think that is the wrong message, because I think that you can hold Joe Biden accountable and say, President Biden, what are you doing about Cuba? The Cuban people are in need our help. What are you doing? Why aren't you doing more? Why aren't you amplifying your voices? I think you can be critical of him, right?
As we should be of all our elected officials.
Of all our presidents, and hold them accountable without it turning into what I saw there. And then, again, there were moments that I thought I was at a MAGA rally in Versailles. And, I think that is a deviation and a distraction to why everybody was there, and the real reason why we should be there. It's about Cuba and the Cuban people in Cuba,
Right.
not about the president, not about whoever it is. And I just think that was a huge distraction.
Yeah, I mean, sadly, it doesn't surprise me that having seen, the demonstrations at Versailles, it's funny you mentioned that. It does kind of devolve into, this is my political affiliation here, and this is who I think here would have done something. And it's like, it's not about that. And the fact of the matter is, I've been seeing a lot of things, and even on our Instagram, and obviously we've been posting a lot about what's going on. And I just feel like a lot of people are, well, number one, there's trolls, and they're just posting to, to hear themselves speak. So good on you. Yay, you didn't get enough love as a child. But there's also people who are just posting like, we need to go in, and why haven't we gone in, and why haven't we done XYZ? And it's like, that's not how things work. You can't just kind of like show up at somebody's doorstep and be like, we own this now. Or like, and I think people either, I don't know if it's that they don't get it or they don't want to get it. I know you and I talk a lot about willful ignorance. I know this is a very heated situation, obviously a very heated topic, emotional topic, but I just wish sometimes people would like take a beat and think before they speak.
Well, because look, I think that again, people who are exiled can talk about the trauma,
absolutely,
of living in Cuba, and can talk about the experience, the firsthand experience. But this fight right now is not about them. It's about the people there.
Yeah.
Right? The ones who are fighting, the ones who are being jailed, the ones who are being beat up, are the people, the Cubans in Cuba. So the voices that need to be amplified is theirs, not ours. Now, our duty is to support them and also to tell people about the horrors of Cuba and corroborate what they are saying.
Right.
Because as we found out this week, and this is, we could shift the conversation now into this, I knew, and you probably also knew, how badly informed people generally were about Cuba.
Yeah.
But I think that what we saw this week was a gross, not only misunderstanding, but a very entitled view of things.
Oh my God, yes. Can I just
go ahead.
For 1 second, because literally, almost as if to illustrate that point, there's somebody who, we posted this week the post that was like, free Cuba, Venezuela, free Britney, fuck communism, fuck picadillo with raisins. And people have been commenting, and one girl was like, agree with all of this except for fuck communism, right? So I was like, let me go in, let me look at her profile. And her profile is literally like the entire thing. She's like a high-end like hostess at like a bar, and she's promoting VIP experiences. And I'm like, right, you clearly love communism so much that you are all about, getting people to go shell out more money for a VIP experience.
Yeah, because what they're talking about, because right now there's this whole, especially among younger people, this whole anti-capitalist, anti-U.S. imperialism rhetoric. And while I've always said this, while there's certainly a conversation to be had about capitalism and, the pros and cons about capitalism, and while there's certainly a conversation to be had about, the history of imperialism, arguments of imperialism when it comes down to the United States policy historically, it's very easy to talk about communism. It's very easy to talk about communism when you're sitting, when you have all these luxuries that capitalism has given you.
Right. When you're like promoting a VIP experience,
including a VIP experience. It's very easy to talk about these very serious and impactful things when you are, sitting, as I said in last week, and I said in my video, in Starbucks with your overpriced coffee on your MacBook Pro and on your iPhone. And I think that, one of the things that I have seen that is kind of like just so annoying are so many people that were like, well, but in the U.S. there's still racism, and and black men get killed by cops, and injustices of the legal system and all that. And I'm like, okay, all those things may be true, but just because those things are true here in the U.S. and we don't like them, doesn't mean that we can't talk about other places that have
right. It doesn't mean it's okay to be. It's okay when it happens somewhere else.
So it's like, okay, well, we're not going to care that this is happening here because we have our own shit to deal with here. No, it's like two things can be true. Like, we can have our problems here, our very serious problems here that we still need to work on as a society and as a country, but still acknowledge things that are going on somewhere else. Like, we're not the gatekeepers of this argument. But it's just. It was so disappointing because I feel that to a large extent, we're on our own.
Yeah, but I think that ties back to what you've been saying, which is we have to take back the narrative, and we have to make sure that the narrative is correct. And I think that that's what what we're definitely trying to do. What people like America Valdez are doing, Jenny Lorenzo.
The work that America Valdez is doing, and there's somebody I don't know him, but I do follow him. His name is Marty Pulido, and he's one of the people that I believe he's a co-founder of Cubanos Palante, which, by the way, hats off to Cubanos Palante. They're doing an incredible job fundraising and getting money to people directly in the island with the Recanga de Teléfonos. And Marley is a very prominent and very vocal activist and organizer, regarding, to amplify Afro Latino voices, Afro Cuban voices in specific. And, I feel that it's especially with people that are Afro Cuban. I feel that they are the ones who are rightfully so rising up and saying, hey, this is not what you think it is, because the problem is that from a PR perspective, Cuba, which is a very intelligent thing that they did, they kind of told the world that, we equalized the races here, and there's no racism in Cuba, and
Cuba.
We advanced the Black Cuban, to government and to this, to that, because under the communism, in communism, the Black man, was the equal, exactly. So a lot of people were sold on these goods, if you will, from a PR perspective, that this is like a paradise, I remember I sent you a screenshot of some blonder than me now, Karen, saying like, oh, Cuba, they have great health care, there's no discrimination, Black people have civil rights, the way they should, and like they're gay friendly, and I'm like, pero de qué habla esta mujer?
Yeah, for the record, in Cuba, it's true though, Black people do have the same rights as everyone else, which is to say that nobody has any rights.
Right.
So equalized.
So it's important that voices like that, specifically Afro-Cuban voices, rise up like they have and been like, hey, listen, especially when it comes down to things like the statement that Black Lives Matter gave, that they rise up and say, hey, this is not what people think it is. What with the Black Lives Matter, the statement that was tone deaf? Tone deaf is putting it nicely. I have to tell you that
I'm not surprised.
I wasn't surprised. Okay, I wasn't surprised, and this is a very important distinction to make.
Yes.
And especially, I've made it and I've spoken about it in this past week, to people close to me. As but probably our listeners know, because we spoke about this, on our podcast last year. I was and am BLM all day. I marched like crazy last year for BLM. I will do it I will do it again, because I believe Black Lives Matter, but I believe in the movement, and it's very clear and it's very important to distinguish the movement from the organization,
Yep.
right? The movement of Black Lives Matter and what it represents and what it's striving for is something that, well, not, I mean, I'm behind, but I think that most people could probably get behind. But the organization is a completely different thing. And, you know, the person who made this statement, or, you know, one of the founders, she's a self-proclaimed Marxist.
Yep.
And you know what? You can be whatever you want to be. Like,
the beauty of this country. Beauty of this country.
If you want to be a Marxist, that's you. You do you, boo. You know. But don't make these statements, right? That you really don't know what you're talking about. You really don't know, because the Cuba that they described in there doesn't exist, right? And this isn't about the United States getting involved. This is about a narrative that doesn't exist. So it's not like it's not like, oh, you're saying you don't want the U.S. to intervene in this paradise of an island that has everything figured out.
Also, it's not your narrative to have.
It's not your story. It isn't.
It's not your story.
It isn't.
And I think that's very important, because this is an organization that has very loudly and rightfully so said, you don't get to tell our stories. You have to listen to us when we say our stories, when we recount our experiences. And it has now essentially said, no, but we don't mean that for others.
Exactly. So that's what I made my video that went viral about. It's like, you have to listen to people. And when in this particular case, the people of Cuba, the people marching in Cuba and risking their very lives for protesting, are telling you, they're not telling you stop the embargo. They're not telling you, this. They're telling you they want their freedom. Que quieren libertad. And that if you're not getting that from those protests, then you're not listening. Because this isn't about the embargo. This isn't about the U.S. policy. This isn't about anything else but the voice of the Cuban people marching. So that's why I'm really happy that so many Afro-Cuban voices have risen up to this, rightfully so. Because also, something that takes is intermingled in all this is El Movimiento San Isidro, which
I mentioned it on our when we were interviewed with Jack Rico on Highly Relevant. Yeah.
Right, which is that started off as an artistic movement, but most of the artists involved were black.
Yes.
So it's this kind of has pivoted off of that, but the Afro-Cubans' role in this is enormous. It's absolutely enormous and significant and critical and relevant. So I'm glad that the voices that need to amplify their voices have spoken to kind of set the record straight, So, I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, obviously nobody knows. But I just feel that, especially after this week, is that we're alone in this. So when I mean Cubans of every shade, color, status. We're alone in this, because very, very few people came to our defense.
Yeah.
Very few.
Well, sad but true. But I mean, at the end of the day, all we can do is continue to amplify, the voices of the people on the island, and it kind of segues to this week's guest, which is Andy Señor Jr. Now, for those of you who don't know, he is an actor, Broadway actor, also a director, and he recently had his documentary Revolution Rent, as in the musical Rent, which DJ loves that their theme song. What is it that you say? Seasons of Love. What is it called? How many minutes?
6,000 trillion 4,024 minutes. And I'm like, oh.
You're always off, but I always love you for it. So it was a mounting of a production of Rent in Cuba, and as a Cuban American, local Miami boy, he's an FIU alum. He was
FIU.
Yeah, he was asked to go and if he'd like to be the one to to go and actually direct it. And, as you'll hear in our interview, one of the reasons he actually said he wanted to do it is because he's like, I know that if I said no, they were just going to go find somebody else, and they were probably going to find somebody who wasn't Cuban or Cuban American and would not be able to tell the narrative of the people on the island, properly. So, he went, and now there's a documentary on HBO Max. So, after this word from our sponsors is an interview with Andy Señor Jr.
Hey listeners, this is DJ from Pero Let Me Tell You, and I'm here with Mark and Vince from Snapcrack, and this is Pero Snapcrack Health. Today we're going to talk about the signs when you should get an adjustment. So Mark, Vince, tell us, when should people get an adjustment?
Anytime they feel stressed, tight muscles, if you're feeling tired, after a workout, before a workout, just about any time.
And in terms of like when people, because we know that chiropractic care can be great for general wellness. So how about for things like depression and mood? Talk to us a little bit about that, about the benefits of chiropractic care.
Well, even though chiropractic is not a treatment specifically for depression, people do end up feeling better after an adjustment. And the reason why, it's kind of like there's like a chemical endorphin that gets released after you get an adjustment.
Right. And endorphins make people happy, and happy people don't kill their husbands. Get that reference. Let's talk a little bit about the benefits generally of chiropractic care, from posture to function. What are some of the things that people that sustain general chiropractic care, how are they going to be feeling better in terms of their day by day?
People feel better because they function better. So, you'd have to understand a little bit about the spine. It does, due to like sedentary, which means, hey, we're sitting down a lot in front of a computer all day long. Your joints, you have these little tiny joints called facet capsules, and there's 2 of them in each and every vertebrae. Okay, you have 24, 25 vertebrae in your body, depending on the person. People are born with 24, 25, and these little capsules end up getting stiff, and sometimes they get a little bit hardened. So when you go see a chiropractor ends up putting motion into those vertebrae. Mm-hmm. And something? What's funny is that I forgot the question. Can you ask it again?
Well,
I kind of went off on a tangent.
No, but you mentioned computers. Talk to us a little bit, because I'm sure that as a chiropractor, you probably see this a lot now that all of us, or most of us, are kind of have our necks looking at our phones all day or our tablet. How does that affect your back, your spinal cord, your posture, how it could affect people looking at their phones?
Oh, absolutely. And then it goes back to, now that you reminded me, thank you very much. So these facet joint capsules, the 2 little joints that you have behind your vertebrae, they end up getting I'd say some scar tissue buildup. After a while, they get tensile, microscopically, okay? And they're called collagen fibrils. So collagen kind of fills in these little facet capsules, and they get a little tensile. So it's important to actually put motion in there while you're working out. It's actually good. Stretching is great for those capsules. And, of course, chiropractic adjustments really get in there, because they're moving each of these vertebrae, the segments, individually. So it makes them more malleable, pliable, which makes them more healthy. If that makes any sense. I got into a little anatomy there. Yeah.
And well, thank you. And now, you mentioned, I believe, working out. How, people that either are athletes or, work out, lift weights, how is chiropractic care? How does it benefit people that especially put a lot of stress on their body in the long run?
So we got to go back to these facet joint capsules. So usually athletes over the years, they create microtrauma. Football players, hockey players, pretty much in every single sport. Joggers, runners, you name it. Basketball players. So they're pounding, jumping up and down, and pounding their spine, affecting these little facet joint capsules that we were talking about. When they have years of microtrauma, they tend to have micro tears. The body ends up filling those micro tears with collagen. That collagen inside those microfibrils, inside the facet capsules, get tensile. They get tough. It's really scar tissue. So you get microscopic scar tissues. So it gets very stiff, very painful. Then they start eroding. It creates arthritis. Mm-hmm. That's what occurs throughout the throughout the years of being an athlete, right? So when you go to a chiropractor, the chiropractor ends up breaking up these scar tissues individually through the chiropractic adjustments and the different techniques, and it makes the facet capsules healthier by stretching them, making more pliable, and breaking down the scar tissue so they behave more like the facet joint capsule. I hope that made, I said a
Yes,
lot of...
and to our listeners, you're all going to be tested now on that. Exactly. But Mark Vince, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to just informing our listeners and giving some general knowledges as to the benefits of chiropractic care. And for our listeners, find more information on snapcrack.com, because when you feel better, you do better. Let me tell you.
All right, welcome back, mi gente. So with us today, we have actor, director, probably my favorite, Miami boy done good, Andy Señor Jr. Thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you. I'm super happy to be here on Pero Let Me Tell You.
I love it. And of course you say it properly because you're from Miami. It takes one to know one, as they say, right?
When I saw it, I was like, Pero Let Me Tell You. Oh, yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously we're chatting with you. You just put out the documentary Revolution Rent, which documents the mounting of the musical Rent in Cuba. And I think it was the first ever U.S. Cuba Broadway production. Is that correct?
That is correct. They used to do musicals like over 60 years ago, and since the revolution that stopped, and this was the first time they put up a musical again.
Yeah, so I had the immense pleasure of seeing it here in Miami at the Night Owl Theater, which I gotta say, as a big fan of Rent, it gave me very cool. It reminded me of like the Maureen's protest, where everybody was like kind of outside and you're enjoying it. It was it just seemed right that it would be outdoors and in that type of a setting. So how did you get involved with this production? Obviously, you were Angel in several productions of Rent, dating back to I don't want to put a date on us, but dating back to
dating back to 1997. So so that we're clear. I was in the production Rent, and then what we're talking about is the movie, the documentary Revolution Rent, which is about mounting, because it could get a little confusing. But yes, I was in Rent on Broadway for many, 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 many years. And then I think your question is, how did I get involved in mounting the show?
Correct.
In Cuba? Right. How did I get involved with mounting the show in Cuba? Documentaries about is basically Bob Niederlander from Niederlander Worldwide had been working with the Ministry of Culture in Havana. They were doing concerts where they were bringing different Broadway stars to Cuba, and it was like an exchange that they had, and it was going incredibly well that they decided, we should put up a musical. In choosing what the musical was going to be, they needed to find a musical that was going to be able to hang with Cuban audiences. Theater in Cuba is incredibly political, express in every capacity. One of the best theater companies there is El Público, and they're like it's very, very, very gay and very just incredibly poignant theater that they do there. So. They decided to choose Rent to be the first musical.
Interesting. So, as a Cuban American, and this obviously is documented in your documentary, which I will say it made me very sad at the end of the documentary to learn of the passing of your mother, because she was the breakout star of the documentary, by the way, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. She steals the film.
Oh, she does. You're kind of in it, but she's in it. That is her film.
Yes.
How did you just feel, even when they initially approached you about it? Forget after you decided, to sit and think with it. Like, as a Cuban American growing up in Miami, you obviously have been hearing the rhetoric since birth, like myself. What was your first thought? Like, did you almost get a knee-jerk reaction to initially just say, thanks but no thanks, I can't do it? Or did you at that point even seriously think, I'm gonna think about it?
You know, the story goes back to a year before when I was on Facebook and I saw there was a photo of Beyonce and Jay-Z with a bunch of dancers in Cuba. And there was a lot of criticism that Beyonce was getting. And they were just like, she shouldn't be there, or she should, or blah, 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 blah. They were just going back and forth about Beyonce, Beyonce, Beyonce. And then I posted a comment saying, but wait a second. No, I posted the photo on my Facebook. I said, people keep talking about Beyonce, but look at those artists' faces.
Mm-hmm.
Their faces were like, you can tell, it's like Beyonce had walked into and watched their rehearsal. And what I, as an artist, I know what that's like. When you find, when one of your idols, people you most admire, like, are present and you're performing, that kind of validation is incredible. It's like it's beyond inspiration. So that had stayed with me for a long time. So when they called me and they asked me to put up the show in Cuba, I immediately thought about those artists. I know the impact that this show has had on my life. I know what it does not only for people who are in it, but also the impact that it has for audiences who watch it. I've done it all over the world. There was no way that I was not going to go and do it in Cuba. And I think that that's what my mom was really up against, was like, she knew I was going to go. She knew I was going to go.
Okay, so
she knows.
Question.
It wasn't, for me, like, it just really wasn't a question. It was more like, oh God, what am I going to have to deal with? What are the repercussions going to be? And I had to like look into it further, but my heart was there. I was like, I have to do this. I have to do this. Listen, my mom was an incredibly conservative Catholic woman.
Yeah.
And telling her that I was gay, telling my family that I was gay, being gay in my community, is also frowned upon and looked down on, and quote unquote dishonors in some capacity, right? Mm-hmm. And I had to look inside my soul and be like, all right, but what is going to honor me? What is the truth I'm going to live by? So I had already done that with my sexuality. So doing it in regards to going to Cuba was way easier.
No, I mean, I completely hear what you're saying. After coming out, what's a little communism, right?
Exactly.
After going through that, again, I saw the film, and it's available right now on HBO Max. One of the things that you mentioned it, it's like, well, finding the musical that resonates with that Cuban community, right? Because you can't necessarily show up there with Hello Dolly, right? Like, Hello Dolly, great show. Will it have any type of impact? Will they understand any? It doesn't make sense just culturally. With Rent, though, even I found myself questioning, how much of it did they absorb? And there's a scene where they're singing America, and you actually ask the actors, okay, instead of using the word America, the name America in the song, switch it out for Cuba. And you can see almost instantly in their eyes, they get the meaning of the song. They now it resonates. Now it draws back to them. Do you feel that there were just some inherent challenges going into it aside from that? Like, one of the things I took away from it, and I kind of thought is like, just on the bare bones of it, is the whole bohemian lifestyle that Rent is about, right? It's about embracing that. To some, that bohemian lifestyle of like, I'm going to shun conveniences and accommodate, and all the modern whatevers of life, is the way a lot of people do already live in Cuba, and so my initial thought was like, are they going to understand, like, por qué esta gente quieren pasar trabajo por gusto, a propósito? Like, they're purposely, trying to live this lifestyle that I am actually trying to get out of. Did you find that, did that become a thing, or did it even cross your mind in terms of like, hey guys, we need to realize this may not go over the same way as... Yeah,
well, I mean, it is one of those conundrums about Rent. It's like, guys, get a job, right? It's it's really like, get a job and not being so childish about, right. In a certain way. Right. But I think that what the Cuban actors, let's say, were able to like sink their teeth in was fighting for what it is that you believe in, um, despite your circumstances,
Okay.
and staying true despite what your circumstances are, whether it be health or whether it be art.
Hmm.
It's like these the characters in Rent have deep convictions,
True.
and I think that I know for like the artists that are there, let's just say, even for them doing the show, right? They were convicted in doing the show, but a lot of times they didn't even have the food, like a solid breakfast to eat,
Right.
to be able to show up in rehearsal. And they were fighting like the like everything against them to even just show up in rehearsal and to do the show. So it was that so they that's what they were able to interpret and get inside of. Not specifically, let's say, the way that capitalist American audience would look at it, but just from a different. The Cuban will listen to it and interpret it in a way that makes sense for them.
Okay. That makes total sense. Absolutely. And kind of, I guess to that part, these are people who they have this conviction. They want to be in this show. They really, they feel like they have something to give. But I will tell you, I kind of shared your little like your frustration, your Bob Fosse director moment that you had in the film, because at that moment, I realized that yes, they want to be on stage, they want to do this, but these are not theater kids in the traditional sense that you and I understand it. These kids didn't go to New World School of the Arts because one day, they were going to be on Broadway, and it's not a reality for them, right? I would assume that you go and you study this and you go to Juilliard and then you get an agent and then you audition. Like that must have been a huge challenge too. And I mean, well, we see it in the film. You just have that moment. Like I said, it's like your Bob Fosse moment. It really drove a point home for me, really, because I just, again, growing up here, I just always assume, yeah, if you want to be an actor, you as a kid, like, well, this is what you got to do. And
the reason I love that scene being in there is because one can say, oh, well, how could you expect the Broadway caliber from Cuban actors that have never done a musical before and don't even, blah, 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 blah. You can say all these things, but if I don't hold them to that standard,
right.
Like, why would I not hold them to that standard?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Why would I not hold them? And then also, because I did, one of those actresses ended up in Miami months later and then cast in the national tour of On Your Feet.
Nice. Coño, no way.
So what do you say about that?
Right.
You don't, it's like you don't know what's possible.
Yeah, you don't want to underestimate them, right? Like
exactly.
Yeah, because it's a disservice, and it's almost insulting if you would have, right? Like
that's exactly right.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I just want to take a little side track here for a second, and as I mentioned, you were previously in productions of Rent, playing the role of Angel, and again, as a huge fan of the production, I just wanted to take a moment to thank you as the proxy for all who have played Angel and for Jonathan Larson's creation of Angel. It is the single most, I think, beautiful character I've ever seen in a musical. Spoiler alert, guys, although the show's been around for 25 years, so if it's a spoiler to you, too bad. When Angel dies, I cry at every production. I cry every time I see the movie. I cry. It is just a testament to what that role is. And I'll never forget the first time I saw the production was actually in London's West End. And it was one of the happiest moments of my life when Angel just kind of comes back on stage at the end, because it was just like, oh yay, he's back, the heart is back in the group, and so I just wanted to thank you for that. Again, sidebar, but I had to do it. And
thank you. Now, did you see me in London do it?
I don't recall. I honestly don't recall. I would have seen that production in about 2001, 2002, so I don't know if that was you or not. But
not in 2001, but in 2000. We closed the original company there in 1999, October of 99. So you really saw a different production, but yes, it's a beautiful role.
Yeah.
Such a beautiful role.
See, I was already just gonna hacerme la ilusión that it was you, and just pretend for the rest of my life that I saw you perform. Especially because Contact, that's a hell of a number. But yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think that having been part of the production, and inhabiting such a major role brings to your experience as a director for the show?
Not only working with Michael Greif, directly playing my role, and him having created the show with Jonathan. So I'm getting the direction right from the source. But also, not only my role, but I would sit in all the note sessions in all the different companies. So I learned the show, and I heard everybody's notes. I did the show with countless amounts of people. And then becoming Michael Greif's associate director when we did the revival, I know the show from the source. I've lived the show for many, many, many years and gone through a lot of my life and understood my whole 20s in doing the show. So I feel like that was another plus in me going to Cuba. I was like, if I don't go, someone else is going to.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like I have to be the one that brings that part of it right from the source to them.
No, and there's also, I think, something to be said for, being Cuban American. There's a cultural connection that, other people may not have understood. Even, watching you just go through the lyrics and translate, yes, it was already translated into Spanish, but there's Spanish and there's Cuban.
Sure.
and so just those little nuances. Did you find you were born here in Miami, correct? I mean, you grew up in Miami, but
I grew up born and raised
yeah. Miami boy. Did you find, when you got there, that there was, even as Cuban American as, being raised in the cradle of Cuban Americanism that is Miami, that you found there was certain culture shocks?
Absolutely. I mean, major culture shocks as far as just understanding the Cuban daily life there. Like, we have an idea of what it is, but I'm talking about specifics, right? Like, even something as simple I was eating lunch and I got a stain on my shirt. I was like, ay, no, tengo que ir a la tienda para comprar un poco de detergente. And she was like, detergente? It was like, there's no detergente here. Or
no, y menos mal que you didn't even mention a Tide pen. Okay.
Exactly. And I spent one whole day looking for eggs and olive oil on my day off.
Jesus.
And those are these are luxury problems there. So to be able to really firsthand understand to my capacity, right? Because I'll never fully understand. I'm still understanding from a very privileged place.
Right.
Be able to be with them and have conversations with all those, it was a company of 30 artists. And to spend over a year with them, from start to finish, is you walk away from that experience and being in the country and see nothing hidden. You walk away different. And when I say I'm Cuban American now, I say that differently, and I behave in conversations differently in a way that I would. I had no idea. For me, it was like, ay, Cuba, así, guayaberas, just like my dad and my little party in Miami. No.
Right.
No.
Yeah, we still have that 1950s
nostalgia.
Yeah. Yeah, the Cuba,
and it is not that.
No, the Cuba we know, it doesn't exist anymore. It's as if
someone.
But
the America we know doesn't exist anymore from the 1950s. It's like no tiene nada que ver.
Nada que ver. It's almost like if somebody was to come to the U.S. having only seen I Love Lucy, and expect that to be what they find. That's
exactly right. And I think that's part of the ideology that we have to look at. We have to look at and update.
Yeah. Now, speaking of things we have to update, I know that Cuba has been making, to a degree, baby steps, strides in terms of, gay acceptance, recognition. It's not as quote unquote taboo as it may have been. I'm not saying they're full on let's have pride parades, but it's not at the same degree. But one of the things I found most interesting was, and I apologize, I forget her name. One of the actresses who was playing, I believe it was Maureen, at the beginning of the documentary, she was very skittish about, no, don't have her touch me. No, I'm not comfortable with that. Joanne, apologies. Joanne. And what I found, number one, my first thought was like, okay, but girl, did you not read the character description? Because these aren't women who are coming into their sexuality. These are like out and proud, like big, like lesbians. But did you find that was a challenge in and of itself? Because I kept seeing, in the way that it seemed to me that they were talking about it on the island was, oh, it's a musical about gays and AIDS. It just kind of seemed like they kept hitting that beat over and over again, which one could argue, yes, is part of the story, but I would argue it's more about the overall, the bohemian aesthetic, the bohemian ideology, shall we say. What challenges did you find from that angle, or did you not find as many as you thought you would?
You know what? I thought there was going to be many, but I'll go back to the whole thing of like the theater that's done there. Mm-hmm. It goes way further than Rent does, and from my experience there, we were going to like the gay bars, Café Cantante, like that was like. Have you been to Cuba?
I have not. It's on my to-do list. I definitely want to do it in the next couple of years, but I haven't been.
It was there's a full out, like there's this like great nightclub called Las Vegas where it's like a big all these drag queens, and it's
I love a Cuban drag queen.
It's very rich, and yes, there is definitely is repression, but hey, there's repression in Miami as well. Oh, Where's the gay bar in Miami?
We'll talk about that later because I there's still like two open, but it's
but like so and many parts of the world. However, yes, the show was very well received. It was very, 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 very well received, and nothing in the script was changed.
Okay.
And the message, Jonathan's messages were in the press there, and I was very, very happy to be able to do the show as it is.
Yeah, and to date, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that yours is the only production that has ever opened on the 24th of December as Jonathan Larson had wanted.
Yes, as far as I know, yes.
Yeah. As far as maybe official productions, shall we say?
Definitely from an official place, yes, for sure.
That's awesome. And again, as I gotta say, there's a bit of pride of that. Number one, because you were able to achieve it, and because you are a Cuban American Miami boy, and of course you open on Noche Buena. Why not? Like,
well, that's the other thing. Like, what I loved was that Noche Buena wasn't something that they were celebrating anymore in Havana, in Cuba.
Really?
So I love. Yes, absolutely. Talk to anyone who's listening, look it up. It's like it's something that with the revolution they stopped celebrating. Oh, and so I was thrilled to throw the celebration of the show and the opening on Noche Buena, and it's such a celebration of Christmas. The show is so, yeah.
Look at that.
Little changes.
Look at that. Andy Señor Jr. bringing Rent and Noche Buena to Cuba. I mean, you are like the musical Santa Claus, bro. Like I can't even with you right now.
In the angel outfit's wearing the Santa Claus, so it's perfect.
Well, who doesn't love patent leather boots? I'm just saying.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you wore your share as Angel, so you're very comfortable in them.
I sure did.
All right, Andy. So, thank you again, for taking the time. I know you're like ridiculously busy. I mean, just the last couple weeks alone with again, the premiere of Revolution Rent. It's on HBO Max, right? It's currently streaming on HBO Max. I know that locking you down has been like, let's do it this day. Oh, I'm on a plane. Oh, that day. And you know what though? I love hearing that. I gotta say, just from a completely, selfless place, I love hearing when people especially again, local boys, right? Local girls, local people are having so much success, and it just, you're doing all of us proud by extension, and thank you for that, man.
Absolutely, and it really was important for me to make sure that we had this time together, particularly because this audience is me. Like this is directly at the source. This is home, and for me that's always the most important.
All right, man. Bueno, thank you again. Un abrazo from Miami, and you know what? Continued success, and I hope that we have you on, many more times over the time that we're doing this show to talk about all your upcoming projects.
Fantastic. Thank you for having me.
And we're back.
Yep. So, for those of you who have not yet seen Revolution Rent, it is on HBO Max. And, one of the things that it does show is not just like, oh, we're putting on a show, but it actually goes into the homes of the actors. And again, it shows the reality of what it is to live in Cuba, the conditions of a home. There's one person there who's like, oh, look, here's my room that we've been building for the last, 7 years. And it's like, a shoebox with un palo en el medio,
Right.
And again, that's in La Habana. Imagine what it is once you leave the city.
Yeah. That's why, this week, and I shared some screenshots with you. This whole narrative that somebody was like, oh yeah, because I forgot what it was that I tweeted, but I wasn't the only person who got this answer. A lot of people did. It's like, oh yeah, you're white colonizing.
Oh, we were all plantation owners. Were you aware of that?
Ancestors that were plantation owners. I'm like, first of all, my family on both sides are from freaking Roja, Cuba. Population 2,000. Roja, Cuba didn't even have un policlínico. Okay, first of all. Secondly, didn't even have un policlínico. They had one park, and that was it. Secondly, sorry.
This person is more likely to have had a plantation than your family in Calo Roja.
Yes. Secondly, I have relatives that were raised in orphanages because of how poor they were. Because they were just so poor, and they were on the brink of starvation that they lived in an orphanage. My parents lived in una casa de palo that had a dirt floor.
But you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about.
So that's why I'm we may be fair skinned, but no, but it's true. My family, and when I mean my family, I don't mean just my parents. Right. I mean our extended family. We were all very poor, because sometimes people are like, oh, in Cuba my parents had money, and I'm like, not my family. My family in Cuba, my family in Cuba was dirt poor.
The epitome of almost Guajiro.
Yeah. Well, no, that's why my mom, I think maybe I have mentioned this to you in front of my mom. I don't know if you've ever seen my mom talk about this. My mom says that since she was a little girl, a little girl, so this would have been pre-revolution, she dreamed of coming to the United States because they were so poor. Her family was so poor that they had no opportunity in Cuba, and this was before the revolution.
Right. Because
she was
in the 70s, so clearly the revolution's been around for 60 years. So yeah.
She was well, I knew that if I, again, this was pre-revolution. She always thought, oh, if I stay here, this is the life I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And my dad's family, también, they were también dirt poor. So it's I know there were rich people in Cuba. That wasn't my family.
The Borges were not those people.
It's funny because at work, my assistant, her and I are always laughing that when you always, talk to a Cuban or Cuban American, they're like, oh, I was from La Habana, from El Vedal. And it's my assistant and I always joke that they must have a lot of skyscrapers in that area of Cuba, because everybody's from there.
Pero see, that's one of the jokes. Whenever somebody says, oh, ¿de dónde tú eres? De La Habana? ¿De cuál piso?
Because, right.
I mean, there's...
I mean, I know Havana's a big city, but it's like,
But it's only so big.
did it hold like 90% of the population? And then me, I'm like, no, my parents are from Calo Roja in la provincia de Matanza. You can't find it on the map. And when you find it on Google search, you have to zoom. Oh my God. When I look up where my parents are from, Calo Roja, I have to find, I forgot what city it is, and then literally go down the street, like go down like the one street until I find this like little pinch of like something. I'm like, oh, that's my parents' town.
I think you probably have an easier time finding meeples from Perfect Strangers than
Perfect strangers. Yeah. So I don't know about you, but my family wasn't known for Cuba.
No, I mean, my dad's family was squarely middle class. My mom's family was okay, but I mean, they were from Pinar del Rio, de Misa. So I mean, they were farm folk.
Yeah. You know what they say about the gente Pinar del Rio?
Yes, I do.
I'm not sure. I just know that people say that. Tú sabes que dicen la gente Pinar del Rio. I'm not sure what it is that they say.
It was just it's an ellipsis. You don't have to act.
Yeah, it's like el cuento de Argentina.
Uh-huh.
So.
Well, I know that you're in the Big Apple. You know, you're probably there's a little bug behind you.
Yeah. A New Yorker bug.
I hope it's not a bed bug.
No. Oh, no.
But I'm sure you've worked up a thirst, you know, caminando por todo el Manhattan. So,
yes,
I have a last soda.
I have a flat Coke, a flat soda to do this week.
Okay.
A flat soda, no gas.
No gas.
My flat soda goes to Jeff Bezos.
Damn it! I was gonna do so. He's getting 2 flat sodas because that's where I was going. So.
So he gets a double.
Double flat soda.
I don't think we've had a double flat soda in 166 episodes.
What a dubious distinction.
Yeah, Jeff Bezos. Few reasons. First off, correct me if I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Did Jeff Bezos say anything about Cuba?
He did not. I checked every single day. He was too preoccupied with his space circle jerk.
Okay, I think that obviously him having the last name Bezos and being adopted by a Cuban, I didn't expect him to go all, posting on his social media about Cuba all day. But it would have been nice if he could have just had a little
an SOS, maybe.
Just that. Yeah. As the richest and one of the most powerful men in the world, I think that could have gone a long, long way.
Y más siendo un hijo de Pedro Pan. Just saying.
Yes. But that's not even the reason why I'm drinking a flat soda. So I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago. No, it was last week. When Richard Branson went to space, and I said that it was a big dick club, like to see who wants the bigger one between him and Jeff Bezos. So, yeah. And now this week it's Jeff Bezos, because you know what? With all the problems going on with Amazon,
that he actually created a rocket that looked like a giant dildo.
Oh my gosh, did you see that? I was like, oh my God, this is like that scene in Austin Powers.
Yes.
They have a rocket like a penis. I'm like, was this on purpose? And I know aerodynamics have a play in there, but no other rocket has looked like a penis.
Yeah, no.
But anyway, again, I am for space exploration. Absolutely. In terms of scientific purposes, whether it's the Mars rover or the research that NASA did, or countless other things that are done for research and for space exploration, I'm totally 100% for it. But this whole bullshit of like flying into space so the rich now can go and again, do that while your company is having all the problems that it's having, whether it's that, the whole thing with like the restrooms and, being underpaid and all the many things that Amazon has been under scrutiny under its employees. I just think that from a PR perspective, it was really poor timing.
Bad optics, yes.
It's really poor timing. And let's not forget that COVID is still an issue. around the world, it's still an issue. There's still huge surges. There's still a lot of people dying now with this Delta variant. And this is when you are going to space to show that you are Jeff Bezos and you
can
go to space. I have money, and Richard Branson beat me by a week, but now I'm gonna go. Like I just, again, you're free to do whatever you want, and if this is the way this is what he wants to do, but I just think that being the person that he is and having the money, power, and influence that he does, I think that he could have just either waited to do this at a later time or just done something else that would have been a lot more worthwhile. Because again, like I really read upon these space flights because I'm like, okay, but are they trying to discover something? Are they trying to
what's the purpose? What's the
purpose? No. It's just so filthy rich people can go and say they went into space for like half a second.
Again, it doesn't surprise me, as I said last week. I'm like, this is what rich people do. And they have money and that you and I will never have, and this is what they're going to do. But, like I said, I think Bill Gates has all of his multitude of problems as well, but I think he's a good example of someone who, has wealth, enjoys his wealth, because I can't, it's not like, Bill Gates is living in, a tutu in Kendall, but,
right.
He has also set up foundations. He's also done, there's a bit of philanthropy there that I
mean, look, I don't subscribe to that whole eat the rich mantra. I mean, I think that if you're filthy rich, especially if you're self-made, you know what? Spoil yourself.
Right.
Do whatever you want. Enjoy it to the fullest. But especially somebody like Jeff Bezos that has the amount of money that he has, that it's like obscene. It's like, coño, you could have used that money. And I know people are always like, oh, you could have used it to build schools, or oh, you could have. I mean, that argument is always going to exist. But I mean, seriously, you really could have done something so, just even for your own employees, something so much more meaningful than just, okay, I'm going to space and whatever because I can, and I'm going to put my watch outside of my suit,
And if you didn't want to, let any money out of your pocket, again, to point number one, you could have had somebody post a goddamn Cuban flag with SOS Cuba and at least look like you gave a flying fuck about, a culture that I mean, it's not like he goes around saying he's Cuban American, but I mean, he does, he does embrace it. I mean, his father is, Cuban American, and it's not something they shy away from, like, the scourge of the planet, Ted Cruz.
So his father is Pedro Pan.
His father is Pedro Pan.
Okay, if his father is Pedro Pan, I know you said he was adopted by him, but so obviously he was adopted by him because he grew up with him.
Correct.
If he grew up with him, then
there's got to be a rhetoric.
Cuban culture, Cuban culture, and Cubanity, to quote Martha Darby from my Big Fat Cuban blog, is something that is very, very, very much has to be a part of him, or was at some point. Because, as we know, you don't grow up with a Cuban parent and just,
Well, unless you're Ted Cruz.
Yeah, but you know what? Canada can keep him. I mean, I really like Canada. I love Canada, but I'm sorry, Canada. He was born there. You can
He's
keep
your
him.
problem, babe.
He's your problem. Like, I don't want him on my team.
That's all you, babe. That's all you.
That's kind of like, when you were a kid in elementary school and you had to pick teams, and there would always be that poor last kid. Oh, so many times it was me. But, and I did, Ted Cruz, I didn't know it.
Oh, Lord. But well, on that note.
But we can't leave it on Ted Cruz.
That's true. We can't. You know what? Britney got to choose her own lawyer.
Yes.
So
yes.
We'll leave it on that.
But Britney had a good week for choosing her lawyer, but Jamie Lynn did not.
I know. Poor Jamie Lynn.
You don't know. Poor Jamie Lynn, no. No, I don't feel bad for Jamie Lynn. Jamie Lynn is Jamie Lynn because of her sister.
No, fair enough. But I mean, like, what power does Jamie Lynn have?
We're showing what she in. Zoe with the chance.
Zoe 101.
Wait, what's Zoe with the chance?
Sunny with the chance was Demi Lovato.
Oh, that's Demi Lovato. Yes. I was like, Zoe with the chance. I'm like, sounds wrong.
They couldn't have even crossed over because one was Nickelodeon and one was Disney.
Yeah. She did. whatever opportunities Jamie Lee
because of
Lynn
Brit,
Spears has had is because of Britney. So I don't feel bad for
No. But
her. So whatever. And I think that she could have been. I know she said recently, she was trying to be quiet. No. If your sister is really going through that conservatorship, and I understand that she's probably between a rock and a hard place because that is her father as well. Right. But I think that she could have supported her sister without necessarily talking trash about her father. But that's a conversation for another day.
We'll do that next week when, because we need to maybe shift a little bit away from an hour of Cuba.
Yes. And nothing. If we're not going to talk about freedom of Cuba, we're going to talk about the freedom of Britney Spears.
As we made very clear on Instagram this week.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. One final thing. Because I've noticed this.
Como hay gente en ese lobby. Like, de pronto, there's just so much voices.
It's the New Yorker. Is it drowning me out?
No, it's not drowning you out.
Listeners, am I being drowned out?
It's not drowning you out, but it's just like, for the most part, it was like, okay, and now all of a
Does
sudden...
it sound, or one of the better questions for our listeners, does it sound like an episode of the Antique Roadshow? Wait, what was I saying?
I don't even know.
Oh, I know what it was.
Okay.
So last thing we'll talk about before we go. What is this whole now hate towards raisins and picadillo? Like, when did this become like a thing again?
I think it's just we like to have a healthy debate, and after last election, this was a safer bet.
So there's not going to be no insurrection of like Selanos of picadillo, raisins and picadillo. I mean, I didn't grow up with raisins and picadillos.
Me neither.
Picadillo is kind of gross, but we got all this. So. But I find this all over the place now about no raisins and picadillo. I'm like, what did raisins ever do to you?
Although I have to say, I'm not a fan of raisins and picadillo, but Bren Herrera commented on it, saying that she's been trying it now with figs. And you know what?
Uh-huh.
I'm open to that.
I actually think that figs would be good because picadillo is done like kind of salty with or savory with like the sweetness of the fig. It could go well.
Yeah.
But you can't put los sazones cubanos.
But then it's not picadillo.
Ay, pero sofrito y la cabeza de tomate.
You know what? I'm sure Bren makes it great.
Yeah. So, anyway, well, everybody. Again, live from New York and from North Carolina. That was episode 166, and as we said, we are committed to giving you a new episode
every week.
It doesn't matter how close or how far we are. Nope. We're not going to do any space travel, so that's not going to be an issue as to recording.
It's not an option.
But we hope everybody listen, laugh, and learn. As always, revert to grab your pastelito, your croqueta, and your cafecito. And thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great weekend.
All right, cuídense, mi gente.
Bye.
Pero Let Me Tell You is co-hosted by Darian Borges and Ismaeliano, produced by Ismaeliano, and our theme, Pero Let Me Tell You Freestyle, is composed by Michael Angelo Lamlaplex, the official gay guy. And don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes.